This is Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app. Evenings with Kevin O'Sullivan
On Talk Radio.
Now, I need to talk about Stanley Johnson, the Tory MP, an MP of some standing, Caroline Nokes. She's now 49. She's accused the Prime Minister's father of inappropriately touching her, in effect patting her on her backside, telling her she had a lovely seat. This was at the Tory party conference in Blackpool in 2003 when she was in her early 30s. This has been followed by claims from a New Statesman journalist, Alys Ray, who also says she's been groped by Stanley Johnson at the Conservative conference in 2019. Now, Mr. Johnson, he says he has no recollection of Caroline Nokes at all, but there you go, and no reply. Good luck and thanks. That was his response. So effectively, he's saying he does not remember this incident, if indeed it ever happened. It's an allegation that essentially he denies because he can't recall it. But the real question here is what should a woman do when a man behaves like that? I'm not saying Stanley Johnson definitely did this, but if a man does go up to a woman and pat her backside, should she always call him out? Can't quite work out why Caroline left it 18 years, but that's another issue. Let's talk to political commentator Alys Watson Brown. Good evening, Alys.
Evening, Kevin.
What's your feeling about this? We'll have to skirt over the kind of rather strange detail that it was 18 years ago. Caroline Nokes has left it 18 years to call Stanley Johnson out. But if a man behaves like this, I hesitate to how to classify it, but it's sort of lascivious, lechy, typical behaviour that we all know about, that rather unpleasant way that some men behave around women, as if they're sort of sex objects to be patted. Is it always right for the woman to call that man out publicly?
It's a very personal matter. If that happened to me in a work setting, as it did in this instance, allegedly, I would just turn around and go, "Excuse me, how dare you?" And just walk away. I'd say it very politely, but let him know I firmly wasn't okay with that. I think calling them out publicly, I don't think calling them out publicly on the radio is the best way of gaining an apology necessarily, because it causes them embarrassment, and people who act like that don't like to be embarrassed, which is probably why they take control of women and do see them as sexual objects. But she's, I suppose, in the way that she's calling him out, she's not demanding for him to be cancelled by all reports. She's merely asking for an apology. She's not being aggressive. But I do think you should always call them out in your own personal way. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be aggressive. You just have to be straightforward and get that self-determination, even though it can be hard.
Look, my card's on the table. I mean, I think any woman who wants to call a man out for this kind of behaviour has every right to do so. That isn't correct behaviour. You shouldn't behave like that around women. So that's my case. But what I would say is, if you do go public with it, and as I say, every right to do it, the man should not have done what he did, and if he gets publicly shamed, then he deserves it. However, if he patted your bottom and you go, "That man patted my bottom," you could be ruining his career. You could be ruining his life. Do you see what I mean? So what I suppose I'm asking is, do you think there's a point where perhaps you should just keep it private because the guy, has been inappropriate but hasn't exactly committed the worst of all crimes?
Well, I do see your point. There is a difference between, groping someone and committing rape. There is a huge difference, but you shouldn't withhold your own experiences and your what's happened to you just because you're worried about their career. Your career and your livelihood can be very easily affected. If you've experienced sexual assault in the workplace, that can make you incredibly uncomfortable to even go back to work, or even, stand in the same office as that person, because it's a huge invasion of privacy that you don't want, you don't need, and it's not polite. So I don't think, if you don't call them out, it should be because you don't feel like you want to, not because you're worried about their career. That shouldn't matter to anyone. They obviously didn't care about your career or your comfort, so why should you really care about theirs?
I suppose the atmosphere has changed. The sort of cultural landscape has changed. And what Caroline Nokes says is that she was in her early 30s when this happened. So she was old enough to call it out, but decided not to. But she says, I now regard it as a duty to call it out wherever you see it. So I suppose she's referring to changing times. And what I would say is, if women calling men out for this kind of behaviour deters men from doing it, if it makes men think twice about thinking they have the right to go up to a woman and pat their backside lasciviously, then I suppose we should all be all for women calling men out in these circumstances, because it shouldn't go on and it shouldn't happen.
No, absolutely not. And I agree. I think if it acts as a deterrent, then, what more could you want? That's a very good ends. And you're right about the current times. I mean, 2003, I was 3 years old, so I can't really comment. But obviously, and they're like, definitely, as I've become more socially and politically aware, it has become a culture where it's a lot more open for, mostly for good ends, where people are talking about their testimonies and their stories. But I suppose the element of the timing, it's been, a very long time since the alleged incident happened. So in some people's perspective, it could undermine the testimony, but I think, as I said, she's not asking for him to be cancelled. She's simply saying and hoping for an apology. Personally, I would ask for an apology privately. I don't think she's doing a bad thing, unless she's lying.
Nor do I, Alice. Absolutely not. And as I say, I think what we're talking about is the social climate is very different now to when it was to what it was when this alleged incident happened. So I think if women are going to call this out now publicly, perhaps it will send the right message to men who definitely should not do this. The only thing is, when you say, she's not asking for him to be cancelled for this, this kind of thing can lead to people getting cancelled. But then once again, if you're going to do that, perhaps you deserve that. It's an interesting issue, and I for one, I'm glad that women are standing up for themselves now and not letting this happen. Alice, thank you so much for your time. Good to talk. Alys Watson Brown there, political commentator. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and this is Talk Radio.